Hello everyone and good day to all. We are now on the topic Introduction to Accounting, specifically merchandising concerns. So before we proceed to our lecture proper, allow me to introduce myself. I am your instructor for this session and I am Sir William Cayano Jr. CPA, 27 years old and currently teaching at STI College General Santa City. For this session, we have 3 points to consider or to learn. We have point number 1, we have the accounting process. So we are going to discuss the definition of the accounting as well as the process of accounting. So this is just an overview para ma-refresh tayo about the accounting cycle and the process and what are the phases of accounting. After that, this will be followed by the inventory system because we are going to introduce to you the accounting cycle for merchandising concerns. From this point, we are going to compare and contrast the two types of inventory system. And point number 3, journalizing phase using one of the inventory system, which is perpetual inventory system. So this is more of application through journalizing of the perpetual inventory system. We'll begin with the accounting process. So if we are going to define accounting process, so always natin tong nababalikan, no? When we say accounting process, it's the art of recording. Okay, that's one key point. Recording, classifying, and summarizing in a significant manner in terms of money, transactions, and events which are in part lists of a financial character and interpreting the results thereof. So kung mapapansin ninyo, sa definition pa lang, ando na agad yung ano ba yung ma-expect natin in the accounting process. Siyempre, there is recording. Magre-record tayo. Ano ba i-record natin, sir? Transactions. Okay? But we have also rules on what transactions lang ang kailangan nating i-account. We have also classifying. Therefore, we will going to involve sorting or grouping of similar and interrelated transactions in their respective class. Okay, so i-group natin siya and usually these are grouped through our mechanical device called the account. Okay? And summarizing. So, in summarizing, this involves preparation of your financial statements. We all know that there are different types of financial statements. We have statement of financial position for your assets, liabilities, and capital. We have also statement of financial performance, which is commonly known as income statement, which shows your income and losses as well as your expenses. We have also statement of changes in owner's equity for the capital statement. And we have also cash flows that involves or shows the inflows and outflows of cash. Okay, this is grouped through different functional areas like operating, investing, and financing, and ano pa ba? What else? The notes to financial statements, which involves the different um, computations that was not shown on the statements. Okay. So those are the process of summarizing. Okay. So in terms of money, so we are only making financial statements that involve money accounts. Okay. Again, we only consider transaction that involves money accounts, meaning accountable events siya. Okay? And then, which in part at least of a financial character yan po, and interpreting the results thereof. So we are not just making financial statements. We also interpret that through financial statement analysis. Yeah, so that's the definition of accounting process. From the accounting process definition that was stated to you a while ago, so we can divide the different activities which are involved in the accounting process. First is the identification. In the identification activity, we are going to select economic events. What are those economic events? In this identification process, we only record transactions that are accountable. There are two types of transactions kasi class. So first is accountable events and non-accountable events. Accountable events, those are transactions that needs to be journalized, needs to be recorded kasi nga may monetary amounts, may monetary transactions. While yung non-accountable events are just events. It could be a transaction but not a monetary transaction. For example, our company signed with a third party for a contract that they will be supplying our raw materials. So, a signing of contract lang. Is that an accountable or non-accountable? Siyempre, if signing of contract lang, that is considered non-accountable. But if there is buying and selling transaction, I pay, and then yung isa, dineliver yung goods to our company, that is an accountable transaction. Meaning, it involves monetary amounts. So that's the phases in identification process. Aside from that, after identifying economic events or transactions, we record it. We record only those transactions that are classified to be accountable or with monetary amounts. So we record it in our journal, general journal, okay? Then, after that, we classify what we recorded in the journal through ledgers, okay? And that is posting, okay? Process, and then we summarize. We make financial statements, yung mga sinabi nating different types of financial statements kanina. So that is the what is in within the recording phase. After that, after we summarize, we communicate. We communicate or we prepare accounting reports and then send it to the user. So we have internal and external users, diba? So those are the different activities that are involved or part of the accounting process. Now, we already identified the activities that are related or part of the accounting process. Now, iisa-isahin na natin sila into different steps. Okay, so I will be presenting to you the steps in accounting process. First step is transactions are identified and documented. Actually, this is part of the identification phase. Diba? We identify accountable to non-accountable. And then, transactions are analyzed and recorded in a journal. So, we are now on the recording phase. Entries are posted to the ledger. This is still a recording phase. The preliminary trial balance. So, preliminary trial balance is also known as unadjusted trial balance. Okay, unadjusted trial balance siya. And then, after that, we are going to update the unadjusted trial balance, okay, by means of adjusting entries. Kasi nga, merong mga accounts that needs to be adjusted for them or for it to be updated. Okay? So, adjusting entries are also journalized and posted. And we have different adjusting, okay, accounts. We have deferrals, preparals. We have also accruals. Okay, we have also adjustment for depreciation, for bad debts, okay, and for interests. So, it needs to be accounted para maging updated yung accounts natin. After natin na-adjust yung mga entries that needs to be adjusted, we prepare the trial balance. Trial balance are also known as the adjusted or updated trial balance. And then, after that updated trial balance, we do the financial statements. Actually, in making the financial statements, before we proceed to the formal statements, we do or we provide worksheets. So worksheets shows the different part of the accounting cycle from the unadjusted trial balance down to the balance sheet. Okay? So that's the making of the financial statements through a worksheet. Then if nagawa na natin yung worksheet, pwede na natin siyang gawan ng financial statements or separate financial statements per category. Balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, and notes to financial statements, and the statement of capital. After that, we are going to close the books through closing entries. We only close temporary accounts. We all know that we have two accounts, real accounts and temporary accounts. Real accounts are those accounts that are assets, liabilities, and equity, while your temporary accounts involves your income and expenses. Kasi nga, the income and expenses are only good for that particular year. Kaya nga 'di ba, kapag gumagawa tayo ng financial statement, kapag income statement, we have a header na as of the end or at the end, okay, at the end of December 31, 2021. While yung balance sheet is as of kasi nga permanent po. Okay, yung balance sheet, permanent accounts. While the income statement accounts are temporary or nominal accounts. Okay, so sana hindi tayo nalito doon. That's closing entries. After that, we do the post-closing trial balance. And after doing the post-closing trial balance, this is an optional one, reversing entries. So, hindi maaring i-reverse natin siya, pwede ding hindi. Okay? So, those are the steps of the accounting process. So let's proceed to the accounting equation. So the relation of assets, liabilities, and equity are shown in the accounting equation. So the simple accounting equation is asset is equal to liabilities plus equity. This simple accounting equation can be breakdown into an expanded accounting equation. And actually, we are just breaking down the components of the equity section from drawings, revenue, and expenses. And there is also additional capital. Okay, so assets, those are economic resources that are expected to benefit the business in the future. These are something the business owns, ayun na, tayo yung may-ari, and has value, which includes what? Cash, merchandise inventory, furniture, land, ano pa ba? Yung mga prepaid expenses natin is also asset if we use the asset method. Okay? So, yan. And there is also an expectation that there is future economic benefits that will flow to the entity. Okay? So, that's asset. Aside from that, we have also liabilities. Liabilities is the opposite of assets. So, liabilities are debts payable to the outsiders who are known as creditors. So, examples nito is accounts payable, notes payable, and salaries payable. Ayan. So, those are liabilities and there is also an expectation that there is an outflow of future economic benefits. We have also owner's capital. So, this is consists of the owner's investments and other net assets from owner's contributions which increases the equity. So, we break down the capital into drawings, revenue, and expenses. Drawings are outflows of cash and other assets to owners for personal use. Okay? While revenues, these are gross increase in the owner's equity from the business activities entered into to earn income. Okay? Ito yung mga income sources natin, the revenue. Examples of revenues are yung mga sale ng products, di ba? Okay, consulting services, depende kasi yan sa nature ng product natin. It could be merchandising or service, right? So next is expenses. Expenses are actually cost of assets consumed or services used in the process of earning revenue. Okay, example na lang na mga expenses are electricity, utilities, miscellaneous, salaries, and a lot more actually. As long as kinonsume natin siya while earning revenue. So that's the accounting equation and the definition of every part or component of the equation. Now we have here rules for debits and credits. Now, the system of analyzing the effects of transactions and recording them in terms of debit and credit is known as double entry bookkeeping. So the terms debit is abbreviated DR, di ba? From the Latin word debere. and credit, which is abbreviated by CR, okay, from the Latin word credere. These are simply applied by the accountant's words such as left, okay, and right, okay, not for increase or decrease. So when we say double entry bookkeeping, it is a method of recording business transactions which recognize the dual effect of a transaction. Kasi nga, for every debit, there must be a corresponding credit. Okay? So this means that for every value received, there is also a corresponding value parted with or given up. So debit, which is the value received, and credit, which is the value parted with or given up. In double entry bookkeeping also, each transaction is recorded by debiting and crediting accounts. Since business transactions are recorded following the double entry bookkeeping system, the next important lesson that must be learned in determining the account or accounts that will be debited and credited in the journal entry. Okay, so is a T account. Okay, it is a T account. Actually, it is only a mechanical device used to differentiate debit and credits, the left and the right side. Yan, it is really useful tool that is used for illustrations, analyzing transactions, and problem solvings. Okay, so that's double entry bookkeeping. And actually, if you, just a further explanation lang, if there is one debit and one credit, that is called simple journal entry. Okay? While, if there is one debits or two or more credits or two or more debits and one credit, that is compound journal entry. So, dapat same lang yung value ng debit mo at saka ng credit mo, even though meron tayong compound entries. So, dapat for every debit, it must be equal to your credit. Okay, so that's the rule for double entry bookkeeping. So let's proceed to the normal account balances of major account categories. So assets, the normal balance of asset is debit. We increase asset by debiting it, and we decrease asset by crediting an asset account. Example, payment of expenses. So we debit expense, we credit cash, right? So the asset account, which is the cash account, is credited, and by that, na-decrease natin yung asset. Now, liabilities. Ang normal balance ng liabilities is credit. We increase liabilities by crediting it. Okay? So, halimbawa, nangutang tayo, inventory, credit, accounts payable. So, we increase liabilities by crediting, and we decrease liabilities when debiting it. Okay? When debiting an account. Example, payment of liabilities. So, we debit accounts payable, credit, cash. So, dinebit natin yung accounts payable. So, therefore, nag-lessen. Okay? So, we have also owner's equity. So, owner's capital is, a normal balance niya is credit. And it is also increase when we credit it. Okay? So, withdrawals, ang normal balance ng withdrawal is, debit. Okay? So, that's a contra asset kasi ng capital. And we increase withdrawals by debiting it also. We have revenues. Revenues, a normal balance ng revenue is credit. We increase our revenues by also crediting a revenue account. For example, sales, rendering of services. So, we debit cash or accounts receivable. Depende kasi yan kung cash or credit sale. Okay, and we credit revenue or service revenue. Okay? So, ayan. Next is expenses. Expenses, normal balance is debit. We increase expenses by debiting an expense account. And we decrease by crediting an expense account. Okay, lalong-lalo na kapag may mga adjustment. From the start, we use the asset method and then mag-a-adjust tayo. Okay, by recognizing an expense account. So, ayan. We increase and we decrease expenses. So that's the normal balances. And how do we increase or decrease every account per category? So we have here an example of a T account or a mechanical device called T account. So T account is a good place to begin study of double entry system. Ito yung sinasabi natin kanina or sinasabi ko kanina na pwede nating i-summarize yung or ma-distinguish yung effect ng debit at saka yung credit, the value received and the value parted with. So this is a shortened form actually ng general ledger account. Actually, may ledger talaga. Okay? Pero for discussion purposes and for convenience purposes, we tend to use the mechanical device called T account. Okay? Kasi it resembles the capital letter T. So the vertical lines divides the account into three parts. Ayun, yung account title, the debit which is on the left side, and credit which is on the right side. Depende na yan kung ano yung normal balance ng account title natin. Okay? So, that's the account or the mechanical device used for the convenience in summarizing accounts per category. We are now done or finished with the refresher, okay, of our accounting cycle as well as some facts about the accounting process. Now, let us move on to a very specific topic which is analyzing business transaction and introduction to merchandising. Okay, kasi we tend to we tend to know service concerns. We already master how to journalize service concern. But we do not really focus on the merchandising. That is why we are going to refresh it today. Okay? It's more on the merchandising. Okay, so identifying and documenting transactions. Actually, napahapyawan na natin to siya during the identifications phase. Okay, transactions are reportable events that and affect the elements of financial statements. To achieve verifiability, transactions are supported by underlying business documents. These business documents are example na lang, invoices, purchase invoices, and official receipts, and among others. So, ginagamit natin ito to support our entries. Hindi pwede kasi na nag-entry lang tayo without substantiation requirements. Okay, kailangan yan for audit purposes, for verification purposes, and to know that those recorded in the journal entries are also valid and legit. Okay? So, ayan. It will also support your journal entries and then kailangan din siya for taxation purposes. Kasi nga, if you are going to declare expenses or itemized deduction, kailangan talaga ng mga receipts or official receipts. So, for verification purposes, lahat ng transactions na gino-journalize natin sa journal or sa journal sheets must be supported by supporting documents such as sales invoice, purchase invoice, and official receipts, and among others. Okay, at this juncture, we are going to proceed accounting for merchandising concern. Before we proceed sa journalizing and analyzing phase, so let's discuss first the key terms and concepts para alam natin mamaya kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng mga titles or account titles na very new to us. Okay, lalong-lalo na kapag related siya sa merchandising operation. First one is the merchandise inventory. So when we say merchandise inventory, this refers to the goods of the company that has purchased and intends the company to sell it to others or to the customers. So inventory is a current asset class since the company intends to sell it within 1 year. So inventory is part of the operating cycle. Okay? So, kaya siya naging current asset. This is what the company sells. Ayan. So, in merchandising, nagba-buy and sell lang tayo. We are not making our product. Okay? Kagaya ng manufacturing, na sila talaga ang gumagawa, nagma-manufacture from raw materials into final product. So, mayroong conversion process na nangyari. Dito sa merchandising, hindi naman tayo ang gumagawa ng inventory natin, kundi nag-outsource lang tayo at binebenta natin, nilalagyan lang natin ng markup for us na magka-profit din tayo. Okay? Partner ng merchandise inventory is the cost of goods sold. So, cost of goods sold is an inventory that has been sold and becomes an expense. Cost of goods sold in the period of the sale. Okay, so this is the cost of the goods that are already sold. So, we recognize cost of goods sold at a unit cost without the markup. Okay, so always remember that. Next key terms and concept that we need to know is inventory systems. Okay, so i-define lang muna natin siya ng pahapyaw kasi we are going to thoroughly discuss this one after the key concepts. Okay, we have two types of inventory systems. We have perpetual inventory system, which records all inventory transaction as they occur in the merchandise inventory account. So, kapag we use perpetual inventory system kasi class, we use or we debit merchandise inventory. Okay? So, remember that one. Aside from that, perpetual inventory system records all purchase-related inventory transactions as they occur in a separate accounts and records the cost of goods sold only at the end of the period. So, si perpetual, kapag nagre-record siya ng purchase, hindi niya ginagamit or dinidebit si merchandise inventory, kundi gumagamit siya or nagde-debit siya ng purchases. At the end of the period lang siya magre-recognize ng merchandise inventory after the physical count. So that's the difference actually between the two. Okay, shrinkage naman on the other hand is the cost of inventory not on hand and not sold. This is part of the cost of goods sold under either inventory system, whether perpetual or periodic. Okay, shrinkage. Usually din, may mga kasi inventory tayo na nagsi-shrinkage, naglo-lessen ng value, lalong-lalo na kapag nag-evaporate, for example, gasolina. So, may mga talaga yan, mga normal loss. Okay? So, we will discuss that at higher accounting na. Okay? So, those are the two types of inventory system. And we are going to go deeper after this inventory concepts na to. Next key term and concept that we need to know is the purchasing transactions. Okay? Inventory account is increased for the cost of the merchandise purchase plus the freight cost necessary to transport the inventory to the buyer's place of the business. That is FOB shipping point. Okay? So, mamaya, I know, meron kasi tayong separate key terms for the FOB or free on board. Depende kasi yan kung ano yung magiging terms natin, if whether it is FOB shipping point or FOB destination. So, bibigyan ko lang kayo ng hint. FOB shipping point is, ang magsushoulder kasi ng freight or transportation cost is si buyer. Pero kapag destination, ang magsushoulder ng freight cost or transportation cost is si seller. Now, kapag FOB shipping point, ayun. So, ang natin dyan, i-record kapag we are using perpetual, we use or we add another or we increase. Okay, our merchandise inventory account by the cost of the freight. Okay, so inventory is always recorded at the final cost to the buyer. Purchase price, less allowances received from the seller, and any cash discounts taken. So, yes, you heard it right. Okay, yung mga purchases natin, nalilesen yan through discounts or purchase discount. We also have trade discounts. And actually, we have different types of discount. The trade discount and the cash discount. Ang trade discount is not actually a discount. Kasi nga, these are deducted as part of the initial purchase price or purchase transaction. And they are not a purchase discount. Kasi, nag-change lang or nag-update lang yung price niya sa list price. Okay? Pero, mas makaka-benefit tayo kapag may cash discount. Kasi from that trade discount, nagbago na yung price and then nag-offer pa sila ng cash discount, dyan tayo actually mas naka-benefit. Okay? So, purchase returns, as the word tells us, returns. Okay? This is an inventory account that decrease for the cost of the merchandise returned to the seller, less any allowances or discounts already. The next key terms and concept to know is the sales transactions. So if we recognize sale kasi class, the inventory is decreased. Siyempre, yung inventory yung item to be sold natin. So if there is a sale, the inventory account is decreased, and the effect of that, the cost of goods sold is increased for the cost of the merchandise sold. We already know from the previous slides that cost of goods sold, those are the cost of the inventory that are recorded at unit cost. Wala pa yung markup. So this will record the items or inventory that was sold at cost. Okay? So, this aside from that, the freight cost necessary to transport the inventory to the buyer's place of the business is an expense in the period of sale. So, if we are going to transport it, deliver the item to the customer, magiging expense natin yan in the period of sale if we are on the FOB destination. Meaning, kung tayo ang seller tapos FOB destination, tayo ang mag-shoulder niyan ng expenses when we are going to deliver that on the seller. Okay? So, transport out or transportation out or freight out, yung other terms niya, are typical accounts that is used to record the expense. So, aside from that, the selling price of the merchandise sold represents revenue of the seller and is recorded in a separate transaction. So, dito kasi, this point of view is specifically referred to Perpetual. Okay? Kasi gumagamit tayo ng merchandise inventory na account. While sa periodic purchases. Okay? So, when we say selling price, yan yung cost ng natin, na inventory with markup na. Okay? So, yung cost of goods sold is wala pa yung markup. So, refresh natin na para hindi tayo malito. Aside from that, we have these trade discounts which are deducted as part of the initial sale transaction, and again, trade discounts are not cash discount, okay, and nor a contra revenue. So they are just a deduction to the initial sale price. Okay, so therefore, nagbaba talaga yung item, hindi siya discount. Okay, this is a deduction to the initial item. Okay, so yung pinaka talaga na makapagpababa sa natin is, sa sale natin is, or sa revenue natin is, the cash discount. Okay, so that is sales transactions. Okay, so we continue the key terms and concepts to know, and the next is sales returns. So this is actually a return coming from the customer. This was recorded already as sales, pero binalik ulit na customer. So, meron tayong i-adjust. Okay? So, here, the inventory account is increased again. And the cost of goods sold is decreased kasi nga, na-record na natin siya sale and na-record na natin siya sa cost of goods sold account natin. So, therefore, nabawasan yung inventory because of the sale, tas binalik, i-increase na natin ulit yung inventory kasi binalik. Okay? Parang bumalik sa atin yung or bumalik sa warehouse yung inventory. And then, yung cost of goods sold natin, which is tumaas because of the sale, pabababaan natin siya kasi nga binalik sa atin ang inventory. So, that is the nature of the sales returns. And sales returns and allowances is increased, and cash or accounts receivable is decreased for the selling price of the merchandise returned by the buyer. So, don't worry, itong mga concepts na to, madadaanan natin later sa kada part ng journal entries natin. We always take note that whether you are always know whether you are the buyer or the seller in the transaction. Kasi some of the accounts used and some of the dollar amounts or peso amounts recorded will differ depending on whether you are the buyer or seller on the transaction. Okay? Kasi mas nice or better na kailangan alam natin kung anong perspective natin. Are we the seller or are we the buyer? Even though kasi na seller tayo, bumibili din tayo. Ano binibili natin? Purchases, raw materials, supplies, right? So we are the buyer in the perspective, all even though we are the seller of our inventory. So mas maganda that before recording the transaction, we have to know anong perspective bang i-record natin. Perspective as a seller or perspective as a buyer. Okay, so you have to think of that. The next key terms and concepts that we need to know is transportation or freight cost. So, freight cost po ang other term for transportation cost. Ang always the problem natin dito is sino ang magso-shoulder ng freight? Okay, is it the buyer or is it the seller? So here, depende kasi yan kung ano yung free on board terms natin. We have free on board shipping point. When we say FOB shipping point, purchaser is responsible for paying the shipping charges. So they are usually prepared by the seller and added to the invoice, but the buyer adds the shipping cost to the inventory. So if the seller prepays, the seller has a receivable from the buyer. So kasi nga ang nagbayad si seller. So therefore, kung nagbayad si seller, may receivable si seller kay buyer. Halimbawa, tayo yung buyer. So, the term is FOB shipping point. Therefore, ang magsushoulder ng transportation cost tayo as buyer. However, if in advance paid ni seller yung transportation cost, i-add na lang niya sa receivable niya sa atin. Okay? So, that will make another entry. Okay, so that's FOB shipping point. So, dito lang na part is we just have to know kung sino ang mag-shoulder ng freight. FOB shipping point, purchaser or buyer. What about the FOB destination? So, FOB destination or free on board destination, the seller is responsible for paying the shipping charges and they are recorded as an expense or transportation out. So, kung tayo ang seller, tapos FOB destination, tayo mismo na seller ang liable to pay the shipping cost, hindi ang buyer. So, therefore, magiging expense yan sa atin. And that is transportation out or freight out. Okay, the buyer does not make an entry here. Okay, so transportation and freight costs are not subject to a cash discount. So always remember that. And here comes the last key terms and concept that we need to know. The credit terms. So, lahat ng mga accountancy students, from the beginning, nahihirapan sila mag-interpret ng credit terms. Sir, ano ba yung 2N and 30? So, ganito yan. This is how we interpret. So, generally, we take a form of 210, for example, and 30. The 2 here is that type of discount that you are going to take if you have to pay it within the discount period. That is 2%. So, the 10 here is, 10 is the discount period in days. So, you are given 10 days only to pay the said amount for you to take 2% discount. So, that's 2 over 10. Okay? What's the N, sir? N is the net or total amount to pay. So, you are going to pay the total amount after 30 days. So, that's 30. Okay? 30 is the number of days after the invoice date that the net amount is due. So, meaning, after 30 days, if nagbayad ka dyan, you will no longer avail the discount. Kasi nga, bibigyan ka lang ng discount if you pay within 10 days. And that is 2%. So, that's how you read credit terms or interpret credit terms. So, only purchases are subject to the discount. Transportation or freight costs paid by the seller on behalf of the buyer are not subject to the discount. So, paki-remember lang. Cash discounts reduce the cost of inventory for the buyer. Kasi nga, we credit merchandise inventory pag ganon. Okay, cash discounts. And cash discounts reduce the revenue for the seller. Okay, so we debit sales discounts, credit a contra revenue account. Okay, so that's how you interpret credit terms and what is the effect if we are going to avail the discount within the discount period given. So now, tapos na tayo sa key concepts, okay, about merchandising concern. So, meron na tayong prior knowledge on what to expect or ano ba yung mga account titles na i-encounter natin. But before we dive into the different journal entries, let us first discuss the two types of inventory system, which are actually perpetual inventory systems and periodic inventory system. This was actually given or explained kanina, kaya nga lang medyo pahapyaw. So ngayon, i-detail by detail na natin, especially yung pinaka-focus natin today is the perpetual inventory. Okay, so we are going to provide a series of problems or examples para ma-practice yung journal entry ability natin. Okay? Let's discuss first the perpetual inventory system. So under perpetual inventory system, it maintains a continuous record of the amount of inventory on hand. So, nagme-maintain siya ng record. So, ang tawag ng record na mini-maintain under perpetual is stock cards. Na nandoon yung beginning balance, magkano ang na-add on for the particular period, at magkano yung nabawas na inventory. Okay, from the warehouse. So, yun yung stock cards na nag-a-update ng running balance ng inventory natin. So, that's how perpetual inventory system works. Kaya, at the end of the period, kung magkano yung inventory doon na running balance, is yun na yung inventory on hand for that particular inventory. Okay? So, mas madali actually ang perpetual. Kasi nga, ang magiging optional nito is, magiging optional na lang yung physical counting. But there are some entities talaga na even though they maintain perpetual inventory system, they do also physical counting at the year end para mas ma-check lang talaga or ma-verify kung nag-match ba yung items on hand physically or actual kaysa sa libro nila or sa stock cards na mini-maintain nila. Okay? So, this perpetual record is maintained by adding the cost of each new purchase item to the inventory account and subtracting the cost of each item sold from the account. So, sa definition or sa statement pa lang nito, ang ini-explain niya or dinidescribe is the running balance of the records maintained. So, when an item is sold, its cost is recorded in the cost of goods sold account. So, lahat ng mga sold items, ilalabas na yon sa inventory ng particular account na yan at ita-transfer doon sa cost of goods sold account. Okay, so that's how the system of perpetual inventory works. On the other hand, periodic inventory system do not continuously update its records of the quantity and cost of goods sold that are on hand and sold. So dito, wala siyang mini-maintain na stock cards. Instead, the company simply records the cost of new merchandise in a temporary purchases account. Kung si Perpetual gumagamit or nag-i-entry ng merchandise inventory, credit, accounts payable, or cash, kapag na-sold na, ayun, magdi-decrease yung debit cash or debit accounts receivable, credit, sales, and then magre-recognize ka na naman ng cost of goods sold, credit, merchandise inventory. Pero dito, hindi merchandise inventory ang ginagamit niya, kundi purchases na accounts. Whenever there is an additional purchase that was brought in the current year, they use or they debit purchases. Okay? So, when merchandise is sold, only revenue is recorded. We have here a contrast example of perpetual and periodic inventory system. So, ganito ang entries nila. Okay? So, pagdating sa periodic, when we purchase goods, they debit purchases and credit accounts payable or cash. Depende yan kung cash purchase or credit purchase. Pagdating naman sa perpetual, they debit merchandise inventory, credit, accounts payable, or cash. So, pagdating sa sale of goods naman, it's either accounts receivable or cash and they credit sales. Okay? So, yan yung periodic. Pero dito sa perpetual, kapag may sale, they do debit accounts receivable or cash, depende yan kung cash or credit sale, and they credit sales. Right? So, aside from that, they have an additional entry to record the decrease of the inventory. So they debit cost of goods sold to transfer the inventory that was sold on the cost of goods sold account, and they credit inventory or merchandise inventory to decrease the number of inventory that was sold, okay, or on hand. Okay, so that's how the perpetual and periodic inventory works. Nagkakaiba lang talaga sila sa entries nila. So we have to note here that on periodic, no entry na wala nang further entries as to the record of inventory and cost of goods sold. Kasi nga, the impact of the cost of goods sold is via an end of period update na lang siya. Okay, of inventory and the closing of purchases and related accounts. So, sa closing entries natin mamaya, okay, or if we go beyond the topic or merchandising concern, malalaman natin that in the end na lang tayo mag-update ng cost of goods sold and then the update of the inventory. Okay, so that's the difference between periodic and perpetual as to the journal entries. Since we already know the difference between the perpetual and periodic inventory systems, iisa-isahin na natin siya. And we are going to practice journal entries and different scenarios in connection to the application of perpetual inventory system. So we'll begin with the purchase transaction. So we have here an example 1. 800 of inventory is purchased for cash and the term is FOB shipping point. So dito pa lang, pag sinabing shipping point, alam na natin na tayo ang buyer, tayo ang nag-purchase, tapos FOB shipping point pa, it means tayo ang mag-shoulder ng freight. And the freight is also capitalizable to our merchandise inventory. Kaya i-debit din natin to merchandise inventory and credit appropriate account, which is cash. 'Di ba? So, yan na yung idea natin ngayon. So, to proceed, in a separate transaction, the purchaser pays 100 of the shipping charges to the shipping company, which are added to the cost of inventory. So, therefore, the total cost of the inventory is the purchase price na 800 plus 100 na shipping charges. So, we debit muna merchandise inventory 800, which is the purchase price, and credit cash. And we have another debit, merchandise inventory na 100, which represents the shipping charges, credit cash 100. Pero guys, pwede nyo naman siyang isahin. Merchandise inventory 900, credit cash 900 pesos. Okay? So another example or another additional statement or information, 200 daw of this merchandise which was purchased is returned prior to payment. So, ibalik natin. So, there is a purchase return. Ibabalik natin siguro upon checking may nakita tayong defective products. And now, ibabalik natin siya. So, magre-reverse lang tayo ng entries. Siyempre, binalik natin. Ibalik din sa atin yung cash. We debit cash, which is worth of 200, and we credit inventory para mabawasan yung inventory natin doon na na-record. Kasi nga, nagbalik tayo and then nag-return tayo ng 200 pesos worth of inventory. So, that's how we journalize that purchase transaction. So, let's proceed with the example number 2. Okay? So, 800 of the inventory is purchased on account. FOB shipping point. FOB shipping point pa din. So, meaning tayo ang may liability to pay the transaction cost or freight. The seller pays 100 to the shipping company on behalf of the buyer, which is added to the seller's invoice. So, the credit terms offered by the seller, so, 210 and N30, meaning 2% discount availed within 10 days, okay, if paid within 10 days, net on 30 days. So, kasi ito, credit purchase. Okay, inutang lang natin. So, binigyan tayo ng privilege na bibigyan tayo ng 2% discount if makakabayad tayo within 10 days or kung hindi naman, paid the net amount or the amount or the total amount within 30 days. So, 30 days yung palugit sa atin. So, therefore, the total cost of the inventory purchase, it is 800 plus the purchase price, 100 shipping charges. So, dito, Okay, inisa niya na lang, kinompound niya, merchandise inventory 900 and credit accounts payable 900. And this 900 represents the purchase price and the shipping cost. Okay? So, aside from that, if we are going to base it on the example previous, 200 of the merchandise purchase is returned prior to payment. So, before the payment, ni-return natin siya. Credit lang natin, or i-credit lang natin yung merchandise inventory para mabawas yung binalik nating merchandise. Pero bawasan din natin yung accounts payable natin, and to decrease an accounts payable or liability, we have to debit it. Diba? So, that's 200, 200. Now, here comes magbabayad tayo. So, when the invoice is paid within the discount period, so 800, di ba? Okay, less the return, ang magiging merchandise na lang natin is 600. So, if we avail it, or if we avail the discount period, 600 times 2%, that is 12 pesos. So, out of the 600, 12 pesos discount yung na-avail natin. Okay? So, ayan. 700 owed, that's 600 plus 100 shipping. Okay. Less 12, which is the discount. So, ang babayaran lang natin na cash is 688. So, accounts payable, 700. Okay. Credit, cash, 688 pesos. And another credit, which is merchandise inventory, 12 pesos. So, that's how we entry, okay, kapag meron siyang discount. Okay? So, ayan, i-internalize nyo muna para wala nang masyadong confusions. Okay, so, ang tawag dito kasi na type of entry is compound entry. So, we have 1 debit and 2 credits. Okay? Yung kanina, simple entry yon. Ayan. So, that's example number 2. We are now down to the last example for purchase transaction, and example number 3, 800 of inventory is purchased on account, but here the term is FOB destination. So, review muna tayo. When we say FOB destination, si seller ang magcha-charge ng freight cost. Siya yung mag-shoulder. So, in a separate transaction, the seller pays 100 of shipping charges to the shipping company. The buyer records only the cost of the merchandise, and the credit terms offered by the seller are 2% if paid within 10 days, net on 30 days. Therefore, the total cost of the inventory purchase is 800 purchase price. Okay, so wag na nating isama yung shipping charges kasi tayo buyer tayo sa perspective na to. Since FOB destination, wala tayong pake doon sa shipping charge kasi nga iso-shoulder yun ng seller. So, we only debit the cost of the purchase price. Okay, so it's merchandise inventory 800 and accounts payable kasi nga credit naman siya nung kinuha natin 800 pesos. So, additional information, 200 na naman of the merchandise purchase is returned prior to the payment. So, before tayo nagbayad na, okay, nagbalik tayo ng 200 merchandise. So, here, since defective siguro, yan na lang i-assume natin, binalik natin. So, we are going to decrease the accounts payable. So, if we are going to decrease a liability account, i-debit natin siya. And if we are going to decrease an asset account, i-credit natin siya. Kaya, debit accounts payable 200, credit merchandise inventory 200. Ayan. So, next is, when the invoice is paid within the discount period, assuming that the credit terms is 2%, paid within 10 days and net on 30 days. So, di ba 800 yung purchase price? Nagbalik tayo ng 200, right? So, ang merchandise natin on hand is 600. So, dito tayo magbe-base ngayon ng 2% discount. So, that is 12 pesos. So, yung 600 natin na utang, less the 12 discount, 12 pesos discount, ang babayaran na lang natin is 588. Okay? So, accounts payable, that is 600. Okay? So, credit, cash, 588, and merchandise, which is merchandise inventory, which is 12 peso discount. Okay, so there you have it for the purchase transactions. Okay, so since we are done with the purchase transaction using the perpetual inventory method, we are now going to introduce to you the sales transaction na naman. So, to begin, when companies sell merchandise inventory, the transaction requires two journal entries. 'Di ba? Ito yung sinabi natin kanina. Kapag perpetual, kapag may sale of merchandise, we have two entries. So the first entry records the revenue from the sale at the selling price. And record the second entry. And the second entry decreases the inventory account and records the expense of the sale at cost. So meaning the first entry, magre-record tayo ng revenue at the selling price. So value received or we debit cash or AR, we credit sales, okay, at the selling price. Na with markup na ha. Okay. The second entry decreases the inventory account. So, para ma-update naman din yung inventory natin. And we increase the cost of goods sold actually kasi there is a sale. Yung cost of goods sold again is the cost or the unit cost of the inventory at unit cost. Wala siyang markup. Okay? So, with debit cost of goods sold, we credit merchandise inventory. So, revenue or sales is recorded at the time the transaction occurs, regardless of whether the payment is received from the buyer. So, that's actually accrual basis of accounting. Revenue is always greater than the cost of goods sold. Kasi nga, the revenue, meron na siyang markup. The cost is at unit cost. Kaya nga, if you are going to deduct selling price as to the unit cost, the answer is gross profit. Okay? So, ayan. To continue, inventory is decreased for the cost of the inventory sold, which includes price paid of the goods plus all necessary costs of getting the inventory to the company's place of business and ready to sell as noted above. Okay, so we'll begin with the example number 1. Inventory is sold for 800 pesos cash. And the term here is FOB shipping point. Remember, FOB shipping point, si buyer ang magbabayad ng freight cost. Ngayon, anong perspective ba tayo? We are the seller. So therefore, kapag FOB shipping point yan, hindi chargeable sa atin yan, kundi chargeable doon kay buyer. So in a separate transaction, the purchaser pays 100 pesos of shipping charges to the shipping company. So the total cost of the inventory when purchased was 640. So here the problem, ang markup natin is 20%. So if we're going to deduct the markup, you will get the cost of the inventory without the markup. So 800 times 20%. So yan yung markup. I-deduct mo lang doon sa 800 na selling price mo, makukuha mo na yung cost of goods sold. So, we have a cost of goods sold of 640 pesos. So, we debit here, syempre cash, kasi cash sales naman ito, 800, credit sales, 800. We have another debit, kasi nga sale ito, and this is perpetual. We need to recognize an increase of cost of goods sold kasi meron tayong na-sold na inventory that is 640 at unit cost, and then credit merchandise inventory to signify na nag-decrease yung inventory natin at 640 pesos. So, itong sales at selling price, itong cost of goods sold at cost. Okay? So, what if nagbalik si customer ng merchandise na binili niya? So, ngayon, mababawasan ang sales natin, okay, at ibabalik natin yung bayad niya. So, therefore, ibabalik din natin yung inventory sa warehouse at mababawasan din yung cost of goods sold natin. So, dalawa ding entry, okay? So, we record or debit sales returns and allowances 200, ibabalik natin yung cash niya, credit cash 200. So, okay, the merchandise inventory, ililes lang natin yung 20% sa 200 na selling price. Kaya, ayun, okay, ang 80% of that is unit cost natin. Merchandise inventory, debit 160, credit, cost of goods sold 160 pesos. Okay? So, let's proceed with the example number 2. Okay, 800, same pa din yung given natin. 800 of the inventory is sold on account. Kanina, cash. Ngayon, on account. FOB shipping point. Okay, the seller pays 100 to the shipping company on behalf of the buyer which is added to the seller's invoice. Ngayon, since FOB shipping point ito, more definitely, si buyer dapat ang magbabayad. Pero ngayon, nag-insist kasi si seller na siya na lang muna ang magbayad ng shipping fee. Okay, so yung shipping fee na yon is dagdag yon sa isisingil ni seller. Kasi dapat si buyer, pero nag-insist si seller na, okay, babayaran na lang namin, idadagdag na lang namin sa invoice na isisingil sa'yo. So, yun yung nangyari. Since this is a sale on account, binigyan si buyer ng discount period, okay, with 2%, paid within 10 days, net on 30 days. So therefore, the total account receivable is 900. Okay? And that composed of the 800 na purchase price plus the shipping fee. That is our accounts receivable. Bakit accounts receivable? Kasi this is a sale on account. Inutang siya ng buyer. So we credit here sales, which is the 800 pesos, and then cash, credit 100 to signify the payment of the shipping cost. Okay, so another na naman na entry for the cost of goods sold and the merchandise inventory. Again, 800. So 800 is at selling price. So we already know that the markup is 20. So we only record the cost of goods sold at 80% without the markup. Okay? Kaya meron tayong 640. Okay, cost of goods sold 640, merchandise inventory 640. Okay, so what if there is another information in which 200 of the merchandise is still returned prior to the payment? So we do the same entries pa din, class. Okay, sales and return and allowances 200 credit AR, and then we recognize the inventory again and de-recognize the cost of goods sold. Inventory 160, credit cost of goods sold 160, and still it is at unit cost without the markup. Okay? So sana maliwanag tayo for that example. Okay, to continue, the example number 2, what if the invoice is paid within the discount period? Okay, so magko-compute muna tayo. So 800 yung purchase, binalik sa atin yung 200, so therefore ang merchandise lang na sold talaga natin is 600. So dito tayo kukuha ng 2% discount, that is 12. Okay, so yung natin, receivable, okay, is 700. That is 600 plus the 100 shipping cost. Okay? So, ayan. Tapos, di ba? May discount. Okay. So, ang marireceive natin na pera, madideduct doon yung discount. Less natin yung 12. Kaya, ang madatanggap lang talaga natin na cash is 688. So, we debit cash 688. We debit another sales discount 12, okay, and credit AR 700 pesos. Okay, so let's proceed with example number 3. 800 of the inventory is sold on account, and the term is FOB destination. So kapag FOB destination, tayo mismong seller ang magbabayad ng freight. So in a separate transaction, the seller pays 100,000 or 100, to the shipping company. Therefore, the total account receivable is 800, okay, the selling price. So the total cost of inventory when purchased, so kung tatanggalan natin siya ng markup, okay, yung unit price niya is 640. So we have here AR 800 and credit sales 800 pesos. Okay, so that is at selling price. So we record also, again, the cost of goods sold and then the decrease of merchandise inventory at unit cost, 640. So we debit cost of goods sold, 640. Merchandise inventory, 640. And another debit, transportation out, 100 and cash, 100. Since this is an FOB destination and we, the seller, is liable to pay for that shipping cost. So, we continue. An additional information for example number 3. So, 200 of the merchandise purchase is returned before the payment. So, binalik na naman ng customer. Okay, so we will decrease our asset or our accounts receivable by 200, and then we debit sales and returns and allowances by 200 pesos. And then, we receive or we recognize again the returned merchandise. So, magde-debit tayo ng merchandise inventory at unit cost, 160 pesos yan. And then, we decrease the cost of goods sold kasi binalik nga, that's 160 pesos. And we are now down to our last journal entry. So what about when the invoice is paid within the discount period? So our receivable, di ba kanina is 800. So we are going to deduct the returned merchandise which is 200. So yan yung magiging basis natin again for the 2% discount. So that is 12 pesos. So ilan yung receivable natin? 600. So itong 600 na receivable natin, it will also be deducted by the discount, which is 12 pesos. So, we receive debit cash 588, another debit which is sale discounts, okay, that's 12, and credit accounts receivable 600. So, that's the examples of journal entries of the purchase and sales transactions when it comes to perpetual inventory system. So, I hope that you learned something out from this short online session, and you can now do your activities given to you. So once again, this is Sir William Kayanong, and have a great day. See you next session. Bye-bye.